Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Eve, for introducing me. Okay, today I'm going to talk to you about resilience, and I've called it a bit shorter title, this one, an austerity safety net. So today what I'm going to talk to you about is, in terms of structure, is what exactly is the impact of austerity, a business case for resilience, because I think that's hugely important. We're not just talking about cutting, we're talking about selling ourselves as well. The corporate back office and changing perceptions of how we might be viewed. How to actually reduce the austerity impact, so some practical kind of ideas and tips that work for us. They might not work for you, but they work for us. And then particularly something to get right, information blitz, so communication, hugely important when you've got finite resources. The observed benefits of that within the city. And then an example of spending money wisely, and then obviously just a recap to finish. So the impact of austerity, or what's it been on the responder community? Well, we might see within the organisations, within the responder organisations, more brittle, more fragile organisations. And what that means is that we're more susceptible to shocks. So we haven't got that kind of inbuilt resilience of numbers any longer. We've lost a lot of knowledge and experience. In some cases, we might have lost accountability for certain areas of work as well. So someone says, well, no one does that anymore. And that can obviously have a kind of a huge impact in terms of how brittle an organisation might become. We're seeing an increase in commissioned functions, externally delivered services, and obviously that kind of removes the day-to-day delivery from that organisation, but it doesn't remove the actual risk of if things go wrong. So how kind of confident are we that those external organisations are doing what they should be? We've seen a drawdown of response resources, kit and availability of things like that, as well as staff. There's an increasing public dependency, in my view, and I think that's a kind of it's an alternative view, but people need us more now than ever. We're seeing also, maybe not as much recently, but in general, an increase in things like activism and action, demonstrations, industrial action, and disorder. And if we look back over 12 to 18 months, we've certainly seen that in the UK. So what this does is it leads to the potential, only the potential for disruptive events to have a greater impact on our locality, but with a less favourable outcome. So then what's the impact of austerity on the public? What's the risk there? Well, the social and economic cost of disaster is far more pronounced. And that is because households have less resilience. At one time people might have had £1,000 saved up for a rainy day for the boiler that broke, things like that. Well, they haven't got that anymore. And if they experience an event such as a flood or severe weather or whatever it might be, they just haven't got that capacity within their own kind of family infrastructure anymore. And that often means that the most vulnerable are hit the hardest, and they're the people that we're really trying to kind of take care of and look after. If we look at the business sector, they've got a reduced safety net, especially SMEs. Large corporations, often have kind of dedicated business continuity functions and things like that, often have slightly healthier kind of balance sheets. But the smaller SMEs just haven't got that. They have to focus on the day-to-day, kind of how am I going to survive this week or this month. They haven't got the time necessarily to think about business continuity. And it just becomes secondary to that day-to-day business need of running what they do day in, day out. So again, the same thing. It has the potential for disruptive events to have a greater impact with less favourable outcomes on them. So, business case for resilience. Well, there's lots of statistics out there internationally. If you invest £1 in preparedness, then you save £7 in the response and recovery. And that's people like the World Bank, the European Commission, the United Nations, and Christina as well earlier. And preparedness isn't just about our kind of resilience arrangements and emergency planning. It's wider than that. It is about kind of flood prevention, things like that, and the kind of physical measures as well. But you can see there that kind of that small investment reaps rewards later. So, well, how expensive are emergencies or disasters? Well, snow and ice that we've had kind of year on year for the last few years. In 2009-10, delayed journeys cost England alone to businesses, individuals, £280 million a day. So that has an impact on our cities, on our towns, on UK PLC, if you like. Just to kind of qualify that point, we lose about 50 to 60 million a day just due to kind of congestion and things like that. So that's just to give you a kind of a bit of perspective. Between 2000 and 2010, Insurers have paid out about $4.5 billion to homes and businesses that have been hit by flooding. That's a statistic from the ABI, the Association of British Insurers. Now, they're the people that were insured, they're the people that had cover. And think about the people that didn't have the cover, that have obviously had to kind of pay out, you know, themselves or slip into poverty. The average household cost of flooding is about 20 to 30k, and that is rising. Estimates go nearer to like 40 to 50,000, but the cost is rising, and obviously those people that might not be insured in future will have to find that themselves. There's the social cost of emergencies, and we touched upon it slightly already, but you know, the health impacts in the long term of these emergencies, poverty and the loss of life. And I'm glad to say that actually the life risk in emergencies, certainly in the UK, is falling. You know, we see less people impacted in terms of death by disasters and emergencies, but the economic cost is rising, so we need to do something about that. And for me, the business case is about saving just one. So if the work that we do in terms of preparedness actually saves just one household, one business in our areas, then we're proving our worth. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. So people and businesses are the lifeblood of any city or town. You know, if we can't support them, then we're doing something very wrong. Both community and corporate resilience activities do cost a lot of staff time, and it's probably easy for me to kind of stand there and pontificate from Leeds when I've got probably more resource in some instances in terms of staff than maybe some smaller kind of, you know, district authorities, for example. And you have to work with what you've got, unfortunately. That is the way it is. But if we want to actually provide a sustainable economic future in our areas, then the powers that be, our chief executives, the leaders of our councils and so on, our kind of, you know, chief fire officers, police, whatever organisation you are from, we're going to lose out on business rates, we're going to lose out on work opportunities, we're going to lose out on taxes, and we're going to miss out on the growth that actually Christina was referring to earlier about, you know, how do we get UK PLC growing again? In terms of, we're going to see an increase, if we fail, we're going to see an increase in benefit dependencies, which is going to cost us again in the long run. More people unemployed, you know, lack of education training, but certainly that unemployment, because there's a lack of that work opportunity. So that's what NEAT is, not in employment, education training. See more handouts and see more vulnerability. And city resilience is about readiness in us all. It's not about readiness of the people in this room. It's readiness at a city level, a corporate level in terms of your organisation and the community. And there has to be someone driving all of this. And if you've not got someone driving this, then we are going to fail. So you are the people that should be driving this. The resilience community, it does act as a kind of a partial buffer, a bit of an impact buffer to incidents. And so we can often be referred to as a bit of an insurance policy for an area. Certainly, you know, where they're waiting in the wings is often kind of how we might be perceived for when things go wrong. The cost of litigation, another good reason for strong resilience arrangements, because the cost of just one death in your area as a result of some form of negligence or failure on your part, the cost is huge. So again, the principle of save just one. We need to change that corporate back office perception. If we continue on that first point there, today I developed an emergency plan, then you're going to see cuts to your team. You're not going to be valued necessarily, because that's a kind of old school kind of perception that people have of what emergency planning is. And we really need to get out there more and show and sell what we actually kind of do. And that is to people like MPs, our leadership teams, area committees, area commanders, chief executives, whichever organisation you work in, you need to get out there and get some exposure. And there's no harm in putting your head above the parapet and going out there and saying, this is what we're doing, this is what we can't do. Because they will say, oh, I didn't know you were doing that. I had no idea. Recently, the city centre MP for Leeds, we went and delivered a briefing on all aspects of resilience. It included counter-terrorism, but it also included all your conventional hazards. And he was like, I had no idea all of this was going on in the city. And was really interested in it and wanted, you know, follow-up information, which, yeah, takes time. But that has got to be a good thing for my team, for the council, and therefore for the city, because it means that we might have a chance of kind of riding out some of the cuts that are taking place. Corporate risks. In Leeds, we have 2 of 7 standing risks on the corporate risk register, which in some ways Ed might have been kind of referring to there. These are corporate management kind of tools that are used. And we have a corporate resilience risk, and we have a city resilience risk. And both very kind of different, and one's very much continuity, disaster recovery, ICT, that kind of thing, industrial action arrangements. And then the other, the kind of city resilience, is very much about kind of the wider area of the work that I undertake. But to have 2 of 7 standing risks on there for a small little team out of many thousands of people employed by the organisation is a good thing. It's good to have that kind of attention, I suppose. You need to make yourself a team that, you probably felt this during the Olympics or the Olympic torch. You probably became that must-consult team that got to involve them. We can't do without them, and they're a team that say, yep, we can do that. And sometimes you might feel, well, I haven't really got the time, but you need to try and find the time, because that's where, if you start turning around and say you can't do things, it's when you're likely to suffer some loss of cuts. You have to be realistic with people as well. You have to kind of try and manage expectations to some extent, but you have to get out there. After incidents, you need to kind of make hay, really. If you've experienced incidents, you've got to kind of make sure you undertake a proper debrief. You submit a report. You say that it's important to the organisation, and you kind of share that with the powers that be, so they recognise actually what happened, what you might have been able to change if you had different resources potentially, and alternative solutions, or what the future kind of might hold. So that you have that attention whilst they're listening, because they don't always want to listen. You need to demonstrate frontline delivery, and again, that's kind of getting away from we developed or wrote a bit of a plan today. It's about saying, actually this year we went out into schools and we developed a public services course. We did 2,000 children received information on emergencies and how they can respond to household emergencies. Things like that, all of that kind of stuff, people like MPs and elected members absolutely love, because it's showing you connecting and reaching out to their constituents. So really, get out there and debunk that kind of bunker myth of us all just sitting in a kind of a room waiting for something to happen, because we need to be more proactive. So in terms of reducing the impacts of austerity, well, we did this with the Olympics, or at least I hope you all did. We need to prioritise on risk proximity. So what's the kind of next thing around the corner? So for me in Leeds, one thing that we're kind of planning and putting some time aside for at the minute is the potential that we might get the Grand Depart for the Tour de France in 2014. If we do, absolutely superb. If we don't, we at least have kind of planned in, well, this is what we might actually do about it. Because if you haven't built it into your service plan, people are expecting you to do lots of other things, and you're not going to have the resource and time to do it. Prioritise work with on work that has a beneficial impact to all risks. And actually, you can look at the national capabilities and probably say you hit off most of those things by focusing on those. But you need to kind of get more bang for your buck by kind of investing in, if evacuation is what you need to do, evacuation benefits almost every risk on the register, for example. You do have to manage expectation. This next point, embed sustainable public sector resilience. I should have just said, actually, make sure you set up some teams within your organisation so that you're not doing all of the work. It's the only way of actually enabling others to do work for you in some ways, by saying, right, in Directorate Environment and Neighbourhoods, what are your priorities at the moment? This is how you need to respond to an emergency, because these are your duties. How are you going to do that, and how do you want us to support you in developing those arrangements? Make sure that they have some form of work programme established. And we have that. We have basically Directorate Emergency Management Groups, bit of a mouthful, but it's made up of all of the kind of like chief officers in those areas, and they set really the kind of the pace for what it is that they feel needs to be done in that directorate to contribute to a wider emergency response. Now, do we kind of like drop little kind of snippets in there to kind of like point them in the right direction? Yes, of course we do. But then they do feel that they're kind of setting that kind of programme of work. At the moment, training is completely dried up. I'm really pleased to see so many kind of people here today, actually. But within the organisation, training has just disappeared. The budgets aren't there for it anymore. So if you can put together a kind of a package which sells what you're doing and kind of gets the organisation better able to respond, managers are going to say, well, look, there's a free training course there, or it's fairly cheap or whatever. Let's get our staff on it for professional development, which we still need to continue. And so therefore, you're kind of like getting a benefit from actually this situation, because you're kind of reaching out wider to the organisation. And then, of course, there's the LRS, so the resilience forums. And this is by no means anything kind of, you know, this isn't new. You will all know this, but, you know, collective effort's far better than you kind of working in your silos, especially when you're working towards a common goal. And I suppose one thing that we see more and more with the LRFs is that you're actually moving more towards kind of task and finish type of work than kind of these groups that just meet forever and ever. You need to signpost, so kind of like tools that you can use, I suppose. You need to signpost effectively to what's already out there. So, you know, we do loads of signposting. For us, I've got NACSO there because of the counter-terrorist threat that we kind of work that we undertake. But this could be actually any organisation on there that you feel you've got a kind of a link to. That if you want to inform the public or your partners, and just point them in the right direction, because it's all there. And actually, since 2004 and actually prior to that, we had a lot of investment and a lot of work was done. So let's actually use that's already there and kind of say, here it is already. Robust is just an example of, there's a free business continuity tool out there that's been funded by the insurance industry, together with I can't remember the fire something commission or something or other. But basically, Robust is a free tool that any business can use. You can use it if you want to actually develop business continuity plans and a kind of a crisis management plan. So, you know, you use it, it's there. Kind of, you know, write that down, because it's there on the internet. You register for free, and it's completely free. Make sure that you actually kind of utilise funding, which is being done on at the moment. We're in some funding for climate change, for example, which is actually the actual project itself is about identifying vulnerable individuals that may potentially be at risk in the future of climate change, such as flooding, severe weather, things like that. Well, we can use that now. We can tap into that, get a few objectives in there that kind of suit our kind of what our needs, and then kind of build on it. And it's the same with you know, this funding relating to kind of household flood resilience products, things like that. So tap into it and kind of realise the benefits of other projects that are taking place within your organisation. But you need to try and find out what they are first, of course. And then use tools like Twitter and things like that to meet your kind of CCA duties, and that's been mentioned today as well. You know, your message to the public for free. And that's where I suppose my kind of final points are. The thing to get right is to communicate that risk in your organisation to your partners that you respond with, and particularly to the public. If you give them the information, they can make their own informed decisions, signpost them to the right tools to help themselves. And if you actually kind of blitz people with information, then at least they will help you kind of respond. And what we've seen is when we've done this, because we do loads of communication within the city via things like Twitter, SMS, such as Leeds Alert, it means that we see less of an impact on city infrastructure in severe weather. Think back to that economic cost. It means that because we're warning people about those with warning events like snow and flooding, it means that when there's a no-notice event like a gas explosion or, you know, big evacuation, they feel a bit more kind of like, oh yeah, I kind of know what to do, because, you know, we've been informed relating to other kind of more conventional risks, natural hazards. We get less calls because the calls that we do get are channeled more effectively because people know what they're after. And really, in the long term, we should end up with a more competitive edge, because actually the social and economic losses that we suffer in Leeds may be less than in other areas. And you, I suppose, should want to do the same in your areas too. I'll finish there, and I'll take questions later. All right, thanks very much, Eve.
Thank you very much, Roger.